Welcome to your Partner in Success Radio with your host, Denise Griffitts. Quick question. Are you looking to elevate your brand? Meet the Blaine Group, led by CEO Devin Blaine. With award-winning public relations strategies, they drive results across various industries. In fact, a large percentage of our guests arrive here on this podcast thanks to Devin Blaine's exceptional outreach. Imagine boosting your business by 300% in just 1 year. She's done it. That's the power of the Blaine Group. So whether you're a startup or an established brand or a new author, they'll help you connect with your audience and achieve your goals. Are you ready to start out? Visit blainegroupinc.com and unlock your brand's potential today. And by the way, tell her I sent you. Welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and this podcast is ranked in the top 1.5% of the most popular podcasts globally. And it's not because of me, it is because of my truly incredible guests. I am honored and blessed to share time with people who are at the top of their game, and they show up here willing to help you get to where you want to be in life and in business. And today I welcome Karin Hurt and David Dye, CEO and President of Let's Grow Leaders. Love that title. They're renowned leadership experts who empower human-centered leaders to navigate uncertainty, foster innovation, and achieve exceptional results. As award-winning authors of 6 books, that's impressive, including Courageous Cultures and Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, they provide practical tools and impactful leadership development programs. Karin is a former Verizon Wireless executive, and the first thing I said to her in the green room was, "Can you hear me now?" And I didn't mean to. I kept trying to get my microphone to work. So I'm sorry, Karin. I had to laugh though. Can you hear me now? I don't watch TV. I haven't watched TV in 100 years, but that will always be part of the lexicon, I think. And Karin is also has been recognized by Inc. magazine as a great leadership speaker, while David brings experience as a former executive and elected official. Together, they lead Winning Wells, a philanthropic initiative providing clean water to communities in Cambodia. And today we're going to be talking about the book I just referenced, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, which is on my desk as we speak. Good morning, Karin. Good morning, David. Welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. And thank you for sending me your book and your cards, and we'll talk about those too. So before we get started, can you tell me a bit about you and how you show up in the world?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having us, Denise. We love helping human-centered leaders get breakthrough results. And so that's how we show up in the world, whether it's our writing, our keynotes, or working on long-term culture change programs with our clients.
Hmm. Karin, I guess you're doing all the talking. Sorry, David, you just got shifted off to the side.
Oh, it's all good. Karin said it all. That's what it's all about. And when we're talking about human-centered leadership, it's really about helping leaders and teams achieve those breakthrough results while building a culture where people grow and thrive. And that's what when we talk about powerful phrases for dealing with workplace conflict, it's really at that level of team where how do we build more collaborative teams together and solve the problems that are meaningful and that we really need to achieve those results in the world. So that's what it's all about for us.
If you, one or both of you can answer this, but what specific needs or gaps in leadership communication were you aiming to address with this book?
So it was interesting. We were noticing a pattern with the organizations that we were working with that they were seemed to be experiencing not only more conflict since the pandemic, but a new genre of conflict that was more intense. And so what we really set out to do was do some significant research to understand what was actually going on and what was happening in different parts of the world with conflict, and then to give people the words, because so often we get this, we'll be in a conversation with somebody and they'll say, "Okay, all right, but can you just tell me what to say?" And of course, you can't script conflict, but it can be very helpful to help people think through the dimensions of conflict and what are some words that they can choose to have a more productive conflict.
And when you talk about those gaps, Denise, that you were asking about, those gaps in our leadership and our teamwork, things like that, there are, Karin mentioned dimensions. There are 4 dimensions of team collaboration. And whenever we're experiencing unhealthy conflict, the kind that's destructive, the kind that makes all of us go, oh, I don't like conflict. Whenever we're experiencing that kind of conflict, there's usually one or more of these 4 dimensions that are suffering some kind of lack, that there's something missing. And so these 4 dimensions are connection. Do we know one another as human beings? Clarity, which is, do we have a shared understanding of success, of what we're doing? Are we working from the same script? And it is amazing how often that clarity is lacking, and it's a major contributor to workplace conflict. Then curiosity, which is, am I genuinely open to other perspectives and what's possible? And finally is commitment. Sometimes even groups that are really good at having conversations and exploring alternatives and coming to an agreement struggle on the follow-through side because they don't make clear agreements and have a way to hold themselves accountable. And so that's what the commitment dimension is all about, is do we have a specific shared agreement that allows us and enables us to hold one another accountable?
And I know this is for workplace, but this is also for personal life as well. I mean,
You know,
I read the entire book a couple of times when it
aw.
landed, and then I read it. I always read it again the weekend before. I'm going to have you come on, and I had sticky notes all over it. I was like, oh, 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 I missed that part, and I started sticky noting again. But it kept. The more I read it, the more I realized that this is not just for business, and especially when you're talking about connection, clarity, curiosity and commitment, you're talking about personal relationships as well.
Yeah, 100%. And because we're all human. And we're, it's interesting. One of the interesting things about the research was that we studied, 45 different countries, and there was not a statistically significant difference in the approach to conflict, the advice people give to their former selves if they were faced with conflict again. And that just shows that, we're more similar than dissimilar as humans, which also means that how we're showing up in the workplace is not that different than how we're showing up in our interpersonal relationships. And in fact, in our interpersonal relationships, conflict can be more devastating when it doesn't go well because we feel like we've got so much more at stake, from a real relationship perspective. So I think that is, how do you connect at a human level before you need to have a difficult conversation, because every conversation will go easier if you have that human connection, and giving people some ways to do that if it doesn't happen so naturally for them, it can be very helpful. And also, really, the curiosity dimension is one I think we need so much right now with all the stress that's happening. We're so divergent in so many ways across our society, and it can feel like we are on completely opposite ends of spectrums. But if we can really show up curious about other people's perspectives, alternatives, what else could we do? What's possible here? That can make all the difference.
The phrases, I guess, that I use the most often when I'm listening to somebody, or I know we're about to hit a roadblock. I know we are. I can see it. I can feel it. And I'll just ask them, tell me more.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Tell me more. I'm probably in my head, I'm thinking I'm probably never going to agree with a lot of this, but I won't know until I learn more about it.
100%, Denise. And that's a GOAT. That's one of our greatest of all time powerful phrases. So you were ahead of the game with that one, with the tell me more.
Because listen, I hear people and I talk with a lot of people on this podcast, and I meet like you, both of you, the most fascinating people. But until I met you on this podcast, I didn't know much about you. Now I want to know more.
Well, good. I would like to know more about you too, Denise.
I'm fascinating. That's all you need to know. But what I wanted to ask you too, and I'm going to go back to the top a little bit. Was there a pivotal moment that led you both to leave both successful executive careers and start Let's Grow Leaders? Was there a moment where you just said, "Oh, we've got to be helpful. We have to help people"?
Yeah, we both had definitely had pivotal moments. And it's so funny. I was at a client yesterday, and one of the folks I was doing some work with, I said, do you have any other questions? And she said, I want to know what got you into this work. And it was so interesting. And for me, it was not a single moment that was just like all of the sudden lightning strikes. And it was very much an evolution of the work that I was doing. Supporting leaders and training leaders. I was the chief operating officer for a human service organization and the CEO for a national replication affiliate group. And I got to where I couldn't do the one-on-one coaching and leadership development with people face to face because of time zones, because of travel, just the bandwidth issues. And so I started writing a blog to get the message out to people in digestible written ways. And over time, I had enough people who were then beyond just the folks who were directly working with me, who were interested in what I had to say on these things, that I thought about, okay, there's an opportunity here. And if there was a lightning strikes moment, it was when I was looking through my own performance evaluations, 15, 17 years of performance evaluations. And one of the questions was, what do you most enjoy about your work? And for all of those years, I had consistently answered that question each year with some variation on the theme of, I most enjoy helping people become the best version of themselves. And particularly leaders and managers, there's so much leverage when we can do that. And when a leader is better, their whole team is better, and their families are better, and life is better. There's just that multiplying effect. And so that was a moment for me of saying, wow, what if I can do that? And that's my entire life's work. And so for me, that was a moment that helped me get into this. And Karin, I know, has a good story as well.
So mine started with a conflict, as a matter of fact. So I've led a variety of executive roles at Verizon, and my last role there was I was in charge of what we call our strategic partnership channel, which was all the outsourced contact centers that were taking Verizon's calls. So it was about 10,000 human beings involved in that organization. And we had an amazing turnaround because when I first started that role, I was asked to come into that role because Verizon had just started selling the iPhone. So that was a long time ago, and had partnered very, very quickly with all these outsourced contact centers. And you don't need to be in the call center business to know that you can't bring on 500 and 1,000 people at a time and train them to take calls super quickly. Right? Like that takes a minute to get the culture right. And so the experience when I first went into that organization was really, really terrible. And we were there to really transform and work with these companies to make it better. And I was leading a team that was doing that through building great cultures, leadership development, really just working with these companies to help to get to parity with internal centers. It had been going, we had so much to be proud of. The team had worked really hard. Our partners were doing an incredible job. And my boss came to me and said, hey, I think we need to go see what's happening here. I need my boss to go see this incredible work that's underway. And we get to take the corporate jet. So this is like super exciting for me. Well, long story short, we go into one of these centers where I'm thinking we're going to do recognition and celebration. And instead, what my boss's boss did was begin what we call in Courageous Cultures, our other book, toxic courage crushing behaviors. And I was completely devastated and embarrassed because I thought we were there to celebrate. She was interrogating, and why aren't you doing it this way? And what about that? And so, at any rate, I looked at my boss on the way out to the tarmac, and she looked at me and said, like, Karin, if you care about your career, don't say a word. But she could tell I was really, really upset. So I didn't say a word in that moment, but what I did was I went to the back of the jet. I took out my laptop and I started writing down every single thing I believed about human-centered leadership, why it matters, and how you can get great results and stay a decent human being along the way. That Sunday, I started my Let's Grow Leaders blog. And what happened next was the blog started to get an international following. People started to call and say, "Hey, when are you going to write a book? What will you be our keynote speaker?" And although my intention in starting the blog was not to leave Verizon, I thought, you know what? What if we could? What if I could? So that's how Let's Grow Leaders got started. About a year after starting that blog, I made the choice to go out and do this full time.
And I love both of your stories because, listen, when I was a kid growing up, I would watch my grandparents and my great grandparents, and they basically, and this always scared the bejeebers out of me, they would get in a job, get their little watch, sit on the porch, and die. They were done. Yeah,
Hmm.
it was just horrifying to me, and I'm not sure I recognized it at that time, but I remember watching them just fade
Mm.
because they took the one job, whatever it was, and never deviated, never really dug into themselves to find out who they really were, what they brought to the world. These were good people. I'm not bashing them, but it was a time when, you worked for the railroad, you got your watch, you sat on the rocker and you spit at the kids, get off the grass. It was not a good time as far as I can tell. And what you're saying is what I've always believed, that you take those moments and you say, okay, I've done my time, I've done great work, but now I've got something to offer.
Yeah.
And you did it, both of you. And more people are doing exactly what you two have done. Just say, listen, I don't need to be in this job forever. I don't need to be, in my case, a web developer forever. I've got other things I want to do. I love building websites, but it's not the last thing I want to do.
Nice.
And I
Exactly.
think that's what you guys are talking about. This is not the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
There are so many avenues open to us, and as you just never know where life's going to take you. And part of it's the learning and equipping and the relationships that we're building. It's part of why these relationships are so critical and why the collaborative relationships that we build at work matter so much. Is it's never ever just about the immediate task or the immediate project. It's a much bigger game that all of us are playing if we look up and see it. And it's never just the decision that we're doing today and the immediate conflict in quotes with that person. It's the relationship for tomorrow and the work we're going to do the next day and what we're going to achieve together. And then beyond that, I just had somebody I worked with 12, 15 years ago say, hey, can you come tell us about courageous cultures next month? You just never know. Those relationships are everything. And so these ability to have these powerful phrased conversations to get more collaborative really does help us invest in our future.
Once you make those impacts and you make those friends, you know, I don't necessarily mean friends, but connections, they do tend to stick with you. Every once in a while, I got an email, and I'm glad you mentioned this. I got an email from a young lady that I had chatted with and, just kind of coached her a little bit about a book that she was writing in 2021. And nothing really happened with it, but we didn't necessarily stay connected, but we would see each other on LinkedIn every once. So I got the most beautiful email from her this week that said, I don't know if you remember me, but you have been with me with this book since 2021 and it's published. She was so
Yay.
excited. I
Nice.
know. I mean, I was hopping up and down going, ah, I was shocked that she remembered me, to be honest, but she did. And now we're chatting again and I'm promoting her book and I've invited her to come on the show.
Beautiful.
We
But you
love
just never
supporting. We love
know.
supporting authors too. It's a
Yeah.
passion for sure.
Yeah. Well, you have a podcast about that, don't you?
So my podcast is Leadership Without Losing Your Soul, and so it's really about those practical tools and techniques for human-centered leaders, the communication skills that help people to succeed, avoid the overwhelm, to get the respect that they want and deserve, have the influence that they should have at work. And so really getting into the nuts and bolts of how you do that. And so that's what the show is all about.
Listen, I have got so many questions for you. Just, I'm getting breathless. In your book, which is in front of me, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict, are there some key phrases that you recommend for navigating those difficult conversations? And if there are, what are the ones that you trot out most often? What are the ones that seem to really be needed by people?
Yeah. So in the book, there are over 300 powerful phrases, and the idea it's really written after the first section, which I'll talk about in a moment. Then it's really written so you can go to the table of contents, and if you are in an ACE, an acute conflict emergency, you can just say, "Oh, somebody just stole credit for my idea," and go to that chapter. Or my boss is micromanaging, go to that chapter. But we have 12 that we consider the GOATs, or the greatest of all time powerful phrases. And they correspond with the dimensions that David talked about: connection, clarity, curiosity, and commitment. So you already mentioned one of the goats, which was a connection goat, which is tell me more. And another one of our favorite connection ones is I really care about, and then you insert the thing that you really do care about. And I'm confident that we can find a solution that we can work with here. So I really care about you. I really care about this project. I really care about this team. I really care about our customers. And I'm confident we can find a solution we can work with here. If you show up and can say that with real sincerity, it really helps to de-escalate and remind everybody that they're on the same page. Our favorite clarity one is, what would a successful outcome do for you? And this is a little bit different than what does success look like, which is also a great, powerful phrase. But when you ask, what would a successful outcome do for you? It immediately takes you a level deeper and gives you an opportunity to talk about motivation. So, for example, maybe we're working on a project together, and we've got a huge lift in front of us for this week, and we stop and we both know what the success of the project looks like, but we stop and ask each other this question. And you might say, Karin, I got to tell you, I have been working like 70-hour weeks. I am so tired. What a successful outcome would do for me is that we actually are done by 5 o'clock on Friday. Like we tie a bow on it and we are done, because I could really use the weekend. And I might say, Denise, what a successful outcome would do for me is I have been trying to convince my boss that I am a really good critical thinker on this topic. And so if I can like hold the metaphorical microphone for a bit on our Zoom when we're presenting this thing and be the one that does some of the presenting, I really want him to see me in that light. Now, if we haven't talked about that, we might be having inadvertent conflict, because maybe you're fine if you work on Saturday, and so it's all of that, like it's getting all of that out quick, early in the conversation, and now we have a more shared understanding of success. And then David, why don't you give her a couple of the goats for curiosity and commitment?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to do one more on clarity because I just think it's so important, and that is what we call the check for understanding. And this is one of those phrases that if all of us would take 60 seconds and do this, it's amazing how much. I was just as just a quick example of this. Yesterday as we're recording, yesterday was Halloween, and I saw this little video. It was a funny husband-wife video where the wife had said, "Hey, let's go as Stanley Cups for Halloween." And so the husband comes out dressed as Stanley Cup, the trophy that the winner of the hockey every year wins. And then the wife comes dressed as one of those Stanley Cups that are all of the rage, with those tall, cups that hold a lot of volume and a nice pink straw. And it's those kinds of misunderstandings happen to us all the time. And a quick check for understanding. Oh, when you say Stanley Cup, are you talking about the drink cup? Or are you talking about the hockey award? Oh, now we're on the same page. And we can do that at work all the time. So a check for understanding, a clarity phrase here is, what I'm hearing you say is this. Repeat it back in your own words. Do I have that right? And if we can just commit to doing that, man, does everything get easier. So that's another clarity goat. And then on curiosity, the whole principle of curiosity is a struggle sometimes, because when we're fired up and wanting to be heard and feeling misunderstood by the other person. You know, Denise, as you said, when there's a roadblock coming up, it can be challenging to go to a place of curiosity or to want to. But if we can just get the words out, and one of the phrases we use is, I'm curious how this looks from your perspective. If we can say that, it's fascinating what happens in our brains. It automatically pulls us out of our furious because we're getting curious. And it's impossible to be furious and curious at the same time. So even if I'm kind of fired up and tense, and I just say, you know what? How does this look from your perspective? Just asking the question automatically pulls me out of some of that tension, helps diminish a little bit of that frustration that I'm feeling, opens me up. And then, of course, I'm actually going to learn something from the other person, because I don't care how well we've studied it, how much data we have, how much experience we have, we never have the other person's perspective, ever. We're always limited by our own. So to ask, how does this look from your perspective? You're always going to learn something that's going to help. And then a commitment. Let's go to commitment for just a moment. I mentioned earlier that when we're struggling with commitment, it's, do we have a shared agreement? How are we holding ourselves accountable? And so a couple of phrases here are to get specific about your intention. So if, let's say that we're colleagues and we're having a struggle with some reporting that we need from one another, and I request it and you need to provide it, and we got to work that out. And we come up with a good game plan. We're like, all right, let's get those in by noon on Tuesdays, and then we'll turn it around by noon on Thursday. And if we just do that once a week, that should diminish the friction and get us both what we need. Yeah, awesome. That sounds great. Well, so far, that's only an intention. It's not a commitment. So we can say, okay, what's one action we can both agree to as a next step? That's a powerful phrase that helps you turn that intention into specifics. So I say, I'm going to brief my team today. Can you talk to your team tomorrow? Awesome. Then we're going to do our first data exchange this coming Tuesday and go from there. Fantastic. Now we've got a clear agreement. And then I'll finish off one more greatest of all time powerful phrase that's a commitment goat that we call scheduling the finish. And what this is we both put a time on the calendar where we're going to revisit the commitment we made to each other. Whatever resolution we came up with, whatever next steps we agreed to, let's put some time together. And so the phrase is, let's schedule time to talk about this again and see how our solution's working. And this is an incredibly powerful phrase, because what it does for you, we make an agreement, we have good intentions, we've got our specifics, and then life happens. Oh, our manager comes in with another thing, or we have this customer that there's a flare up and we've got to deal with that. And now we didn't keep our commitment to the vendor on the other side. Oh my goodness. If we never talk about those things again, our trust erodes. We made a commitment, we didn't keep it, and now what? But if we schedule that time to talk about it, and we know that we're going to look each other either in physical eye or in the virtual eye, face to face, and say, hey, did you do the thing? Yeah, no, I didn't. Did you? No, I didn't either. Okay, let's examine what happened. And then we can solve for it. Can we renew our commitment? Can we solve whatever happened? The other thing it does is it actually, knowing that we're going to talk to each other, it increases the likelihood we're going to follow through on our commitment in the first place. And then if we do, it gives us a built-in time to celebrate and say, high five, good job, we did it. Let's build on that momentum and keep going. And so that's the final of that. We've got 12 GOATs, these greatest of all time powerful phrases. And I think between Karin and I, we've touched on maybe 6 or 7 of them. So if you want to get all 12 on the Leadership Without Losing Your Soul podcast, you can go to episode 252 and I get into all 12 of those GOATs there. Or of course, pick up the book, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. But if you can use these GOATs, these phrases, why are they the greatest of all time? Because you can use them in so many different circumstances. They apply to just about every kind of workplace or personal conflict we might run into, and they're always going to be valuable.
Like a crazy person. I've got 2 pages of notes already. I do this every time I'm on a call with my guests. I'm like, ooh, I've got stuff to ask or learn or go back to. And speaking of going back, I think at the top of the show, I mentioned that I read your book twice. I read it when it landed. When I say I read it, I just kind of, went through it, scanned, stuck sticky notes in it. And then I read it sufficiently enough that I could review it and be confident about my review. But then this weekend, I went back and I really started reading it to see if I'd missed anything. And I did, but I didn't know I missed it. But here's the thing. On page 91, you're talking about expert insight from Michael Reddington. Guess
Mhm.
who's going to be a guest?
Oh,
Fantastic.
Michael Reddington. I went, how did they know?
well,
Uh,
I
did,
will tell you, he has been on David's podcast. He has been on my asking. He was just on my asking for a friend show. You are gonna love.
You will love him. I've had him on twice, as a matter of fact, and one of my all-time favorite guests. So everybody listening, do not miss that episode. That's going to be a great episode.
Just ran over and grabbed it off of my shelf because I've got a stack of books that you're going to be the guest. I need to review them. They're in flux and it's yellow and it's called the Disciplined Listening Method. So thank you guys. I read that and went, oh, how did they know? I mean, really? So
Small
you
world.
never, it is a small world. But you're talking in these key phrases and you're calling them GOAT phrases. I love that. So David, one more time, tell people where they can go to get these.
Okay, so a couple places. So first, if you want to listen, like you're listening now, you can go to Leadership Without Losing Your Soul podcast, episode 252, and we walk through all 12 of them there. You can also go to conflictphrases.com, and that will take you to our website where you can download an entire walkthrough guide that will help you to facilitate these conversations with other people. There's a download, a nice graphic PDF that has all 12 of these GOAT phrases so that you can have them right on your desk, right in front of you, and start to internalize them and have them at your fingertips when you need them. And then, of course, they're in the book, which is available everywhere. And if you, again, as a listener, if you like listening, Karin and I actually narrate the audio version of Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. So that's available for you as well.
I listen to audio. Listen, I read books. I listen to books. I will not do a video. I'd rather go make a gumbo. I can't do it. I can't sit that long, but I can listen and I can read. So, and I'm heading to Audible as soon as we're done here. Philanthropic initiative, and I know I'm bouncing around a bit, but this is one of those conversations you're having and you don't know that it's going to come in handy a couple days later. But I was talking with a friend of mine and we were talking about gratitude and abundance and success, just all the things that we're very interested in. And I said, I have to tell you, we globally, this is a very wealthy globe, right? There is so much money running around. Some of it shouldn't be, some of it should be. It's this, that, or the other. I do not understand, and I get really pissy about this, excuse the language, but I do not understand why every living creature does not have access to fresh running water. I don't get it.
It is so sad to
It's
see that happen.
horrifying. It's
Yeah.
horrifying. It
Um,
really is.
so that's so our first book was called Winning Well, and so we build clean water winning wells in Cambodia in honor of our clients. So if we do a leadership program, we do a keynote, so people are involved in our training programs. As a thank you, we build a clean water well. And we actually had an opportunity to go visit in Cambodia some of these wells and meet with the family and through a translator and just be able to understand the impact that this clean water makes. And so for a very small donation to build a well, right, what they're able to do then is not only have access to clean water, but they have a system where they put some nutrients into the water too. So it really does make them healthy. These families, and some of them are in daycare centers, and so it does make them healthier. But also, what I did not know until getting involved in this is the impact it had financially. Because when you have water, then you can grow things. And so you can grow lemon trees and mango trees. And when you have fruit you can sell, then you can also then buy chickens. And then you have that whole, so it just one little thing like clean water can completely transform the lifestyle of a family or a small area of the community.
And when you're talking about why people don't, there's many places that we could, and there are many places in the world that need clean water and don't have it. And why Cambodia? For us, there's a number of reasons, but for me personally, when you think about why it's difficult to get clean water, like you look at places in the world that have been as about as mistreated as could be. And Cambodia is one of them that has suffered at the hands of all of the great world powers, as well as all their neighbors, as well as then the resulting internal civil wars and strife and everything. It is a country that has historically just been beat up and suffered an immense amount. And, if any people in the world had a right to be bitter or upset, it might be people in Cambodia. But the fact is they're not. When our visits, the people are just so kind and caring, and yet all of the infrastructure needs and so forth that can be really challenging, especially after all that kind of strife, are needed. And so that's why we specifically target. It's a leveraged way to make a difference, but there are so many different places that can use the same help.
Including all the areas in the United States that have been hit by hurricane.
Exactly. I was just heading there. It's
Oh
like,
my gosh, I just talked to a
yeah.
friend of mine who is also runs a leadership development company. And he still doesn't have any drinking water in his house. It's tremendous problem.
I can't imagine not having drinking. It's my favorite beverage. If I head to a restaurant, which I rarely do, because I love to cook and I'm better than most restaurants, to be honest, and humble about it. But I prefer my own cooking. But if I am out and about, I will always ask for water. Not Coke, not soda, whatever you want to call it. Not wine, water. That's all I want. If you have a slice of lemon, I'll take that too. But just give me water.
I like wine.
But water is a foundation of life, and it is so easy for us to take these things for granted.
People will say, oh, we've got so much hardship in the United States. In some areas we do, Hurricane Helene. Listen, I am equidistant geographically between Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Been there, done it. But what's happening with Hurricane Helene right now is just horrifying. But explain to me, and I know we're going off a bit of a track here, but what is a clean water well? How do they operate?
So the surface water that you run into in this particular part of the world is often contaminated with disease and whether that's from again insufficient infrastructure or just animal or human waste pollution, or garbage. I mean, any of it. And so to get clean water that starts out naturally more clean, you got to drill down far enough into the water table to get there, and then use some filtration and so forth. And so, and these are in this part of the world, it's a hand pump well because they're reliable, they work, and they're easy to replace a part when something wears out. And so that's the beginning part. Is so the concrete base, the drill down to the water table where the water is available, and then, as Karin mentioned, there's the iron enrichment because anemia is so prevalent in that part of the world as well. And so enriching the water with iron helps address that. And so then from there, you've got other things that you can do with the cooking and so forth. But that foundation of building a well like that and then doing the iron enrichment, it is tremendous. As Karin was mentioning, like the one of the things that sticks in my mind was we met a grandmother and her granddaughter, and the grandmother's daughter had died, so the little girl's mom had passed. But so grandmother was taking care of her granddaughter, and she explained to us the constant illnesses and diseases and everything that the granddaughter had been struggling with. And she had got her clean water 6 or 8 months prior to our visit, and the grandmother just pointed and said, "Look at her now." And the girl's running around, lively as could be, just like any young 6-year-old that you might want to see. And so it's just reiterating the impact, the health impact, the financial impact, all those sorts of things. And it's such a simple thing to do.
And without words, I'm so glad and so grateful that you all are doing this.
Well, it's very meaningful for us, and our it's a way for us to give back, and it's part of there's from a leadership perspective, right? Every organization, every single one of us, we take from the world in some fashion. It's just the nature of things, whether it's the infrastructure we're using or resources or what have you. And so, how are each of us giving back? And from the perspective of building a more human-centered culture, not just within our organizations, but also externally in the world at large, that's a challenge for all of us. How to give back, how to make a difference in the world. And there's an infinite number of ways, that's ours, but there are so many. And that'd be our encouragement for anybody. And it doesn't matter if you're a solopreneur, a one-person shop who's doing important work, there's a way for you to give back. It's finding that for you. And having that be a part of the culture of your company would definitely be something we'd invite you to think about if you're not already there. And if you are, fantastic, and let other people know and be a force for influencing how other people can get involved in those things as well.
And what we're talking about here for the audience, if we've lost track, because I know I'm bouncing around a bit, I'm so curious. But we're talking basically about human-centered leadership, and not, it is essential in today's workplace, but it's essential to us as humans, I believe. And for somebody who will say, "Oh, I'm not a leader." Oh, yeah, you are. Are you a mom? Are you picking up the kids? Are you taking the dog to the vet? Somebody's leading. You're it.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have so many opportunities to influence the people in our, in our circles. Absolutely.
And I think for us, that's why do we focus on human-centered leadership in the workplace and all of the things that we've been talking about today? All of us who are leading and who take any responsibility for whether it's a project, for team, or for anything happening at work, it's not just the work we do. It's the ripples of effect that we have in the world. And the way that we do the work that we do, the work itself probably makes a important difference for people in some fashion, some way, somehow. But there's also then the way that we do it and all of the ripples that ensue from there, and the consequence of that. And so, I always, not to get on the soapbox, but anytime you take responsibility for something, A, wonderful, and B, recognize that it's not just about that thing, that the way that we do that has so many consequences, so many impacts, and it's so important to try to do it as well as we can, and invest in some of those practical ways of supporting and creating cultures where people grow and thrive. So that's the kind of the underlying mission of it all, at least for us on our end.
And I wanted to ask both of you, EQ is something that didn't seem to be talked about. Maybe within the last 10 years or something, people are paying more and more attention. It was IQ. I'm this smart. I am. I'm very smart. Just ask me. But EQ was not really banned. People didn't talk about. I'm not sure that they didn't recognize the difference between EQ and IQ. To me, you can't have one without the other. I mean, I'm looking at a couple of political figures right now that have in my opinion, the IQ of a warm potato, a room temperature potato. I just wonder why they're doing what they're doing, but that's not for me to say. But we come across people, and you mentioned earlier, if you've got somebody who's really struggling in the workplace because it's got a personality issue, and this is just me rephrasing, but I wrote down, well, if he's an ass at work, he's an ass at home too. This is how I interpreted that. But the thing is, if we can figure out how to communicate with these people, maybe we can help out a bit.
Yes. And
And
what's so interesting is that sometimes, there really aren't an ass. They just don't know how to communicate.
No, they're an ass.
And
They really are. Sorry.
not who, maybe the political people you're talking about. That's a different story. But what I'm saying, at work, right? A lot of times what we so I'll give you an example. The other day, one of the things that I do once a quarter is I go down and I spend time with our clients in a conference room. So people could come, like, open door, come, like, do coaching, one-on-one coaching with me, and they make appointments all day long. Well, this guy did not have an appointment, but my room was empty, happened to be empty. He comes bursting through the room, into the room. And he's like, "Karin, do you have a copy of that new book of yours, that Powerful Phrases book? Because I just got an email from David, and he has a picture of the book at the bottom of his email signature, and the book hadn't come out yet." And I said, oh, I said, well, it's actually not yet out yet, but I know what it says. So sit down and let's talk about what's going on. He's like, I'm so angry with this other person I'm working with. And it's been like 3 months and I'm just so fired up. And God, she doesn't like, she doesn't understand. She doesn't care. And I said, she wants exactly the same thing as you because I knew her. And he goes, how do you know? Like, because I have talked with her. She wants exactly the same thing as you. I gave him a couple of powerful phrases. I said, go have the conversation and come back. He comes back a couple hours later. He goes, oh my gosh, Karin, I wish I had had this conversation 3 months ago. Do you know what? She's really not a bad person. She really does want the exact same thing as me, right? And so, but he's like, I could have saved myself a lot of lost sleep. I could have saved my wife a lot of anxiety at dinner time when I was just complaining because wasn't having the conversation because he wasn't showing up curious, right, of the other person's perspective. So I think it's easy for us to label when we're in conflict with someone, and it's easy us to say, well, they're a jerk, or they don't understand, or they don't have my best interest at heart. But the first question we would ask is, have you tried? Like, have you had the conversation and given them the opportunity to really engage?
Because almost nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, you know what? I'm going to figure out how can I really tick off David today. Like nobody cares. No, they're not thinking about me. They're not thinking about how can I be the biggest jerk. Everybody's trying to navigate their own life. And yes, there are some, and I don't know what the statistic is, but are there some sociopathic people out there? Of course, but it's such a small percentage. It's not worth worrying about until we know that's what we're dealing with and we get that data. And so, like I think about a boss that I worked for early in my career. He was the CEO and he was doing this marketing event. And I was a team leader, I had a 3-person team, and he was putting on this marketing event. And it ticked me off because I'm like, he's not doing this with integrity. I don't think he's being upfront with the people he's invited. I hate this. I don't want to be a part of this. But I didn't say anything to him because he was the CEO and I worried about the power differential and I'll lose my job, all that kind of thing. And so I just stewed about it and I didn't sleep for 3 nights. And finally on that 4th day, I didn't use any of these powerful phrases. I just popped my cork. I just exploded. I'm like, I don't like this. This lacks integrity. I can't be a part of it. I'm out. And I really expected him to hand me a box and say, all right, well, there's the door. But he didn't. Instead, he taught me a powerful phrase, which I should have thought about from the beginning. He said, David, I don't see it this way. I don't think there's an integrity problem, but I don't want you to violate your conscience either. What do you, that one of the goats that from Curiosity, what do you suggest we do next? How can we do this in a way that works for you? And in 15 seconds, I had an immediate answer. And I suggested, he said, yeah, let's do that. No problem. Solved. And so, gosh, I'm so glad that he did that because it taught me, it was revelatory. It taught me so many things. One, so much of the conflict, and I'm going to put conflict in quotes, that we have with other people isn't with the person. It's with our own internal brain. We're having the conflict upstairs in our own head, and we never have the real conversation. And we tell ourselves all the stories, and it's all imagined. And I had done that, and so many of the times we're avoiding conflict, it's because of the imaginary conversations that we're having. And so realizing you got to have the conversation. And 2, when you do, and especially if you do it using the powerful phrases that we're talking about, you're giving the other person a chance to learn where you are. You're giving yourself a chance to learn where they are, and you're opening the door to a much more positive, productive outcome. Is that going to happen every single time? No. There are some of those power differentials where the person knowing the decision just sees it differently. Okay. But if we have the conversation and you can get those things out and share concerns and so forth, and you have a good conversation, you're going to learn. And you're going to be seen as somebody who cares overall about the team, about the mission, about the work you're doing. And you're going to learn for yourself what the real situation actually is. You'll have the data. And now you can start to make meaningful decisions. But until then, it's all imagination and it's all frustration and stress. And it's a waste of emotional energy that we don't have to lose. There's a better way.
Times I've had these totally imaginary conversations. And then when I did pick up the phone or I did, set up an appointment to speak with somebody, I have no idea what I was thinking. What was wrong with me? None of that happened. And that leads me to what you were just saying, leads me to chapter 16, what to say when others see the world differently. Because let's face it, everybody is going to see the world differently. You have to come up with common goals, common phrases. You have to find something in common and then explore from there. Or am I just reading this wrong?
Absolutely. And one of our favorite powerful phrases when you think that other people are really seeing things completely differently is to state your intent for the conversation. Hey, my intent for this conversation is to have a better understanding of your perspective. My intent for the conversation is to share my point of view. My intent for this conversation is so you understand what this feels like to be me in this situation. It can make a big difference. Or another powerful phrase is, I've noticed that we have different perspectives, and I would love to learn more. So this is a variation of that. Tell me more. And then also to make sure that you are reflecting back what you hear from them. So what I hear you saying is this, and then rephrase what you heard and say, do I have that right? And then you can still say, I see it differently. You can say, all right, that is interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I see it differently. And here's my perspective.
Another one on that
It's
note
not
is,
difficult to do, though. And I don't know why people just go, I don't want to have this conversation. Yes, you do. You want to have that conversation.
and I think we don't want to have the conversation that we imagine in our head. And, that's the thing we want to avoid. But if we have the phrases, we have the skills, I love that phrase that Karin just said. My intention for this conversation is blank. What's that positive outcome for both of us so that we can accomplish X, Y, or Z? Like if we can start there, that gives the other person a chance to come along with us. And we're not doing anything to them, they're coming with us. And maybe the end of that conversation is investing in some commitment. I don't expect either of us to change our mind about X, Y, or Z, but can we agree to A, how we're going to treat each other, B, what our common goal here is, Dee's mentioning, as you were mentioning, about having that common commitment, and those sorts of things. And most of the time we can get there.
And this just popped into my head while I was scribbling. We're talking about conversations, direct conversations, but if you, and I'm going back to what Karin said, my intention for this email is, so I can set the conversation. So instead of just firing off an email and saying, hey, we need to talk, that's never going to go well. What should you do to set that quietly internally, I guess, set that intention and then write an email that makes sense and that is not threatening or bullying or scary or just completely misunderstood. The reason I asked, been there, done it, all of them.
Well,
So,
one of our immediate suggestions on that, if there's the potential for any kind of laden emotion, probably it doesn't belong in an email. It's going to be better to pick up the phone. It's going to be better to hop on a call. It's going to be better to see the person in person if you can. If there's any potential for significant emotion in a conversation, it's just better to do it as high a bandwidth conversation as you can, voice to voice, face to face, or person to person, because it reduces the amount of misunderstanding and gives you a chance to deal with things in real time without the frustration building up and, well, what do you mean by, all that kind of thing that builds up. And so save our emails for quick content that is fairly factual in nature or summarizing or, those kinds of requests, and save our more emotional conversations to be conversations.
makes sense. It's not always possible to pick up the phone. I've got people in my team that work in other countries. Picking up the phone is not necessarily going to be easy, but I can say, let's set up a Zoom call, but I have to be careful when I set that intention.
Yes. Yes.
Totally. And, the goes back to what you're saying. How do we phrase that? It's like, hey, my intent, I'd like to have a call. My intent for that call is for us to resolve some of the ideas we've had around this project so that we can wrap it up quickly and everybody's happy with the outcome. Or, whatever the intent is, it's going to be positive, something everybody wants. Hey, let's do it.
Wrote that down. I like that. Okay, another quick question. We talked about emotional intelligence, and now I want to ask y'all, because you talk about this in the book, what is the impact of generational differences on workplace conflict? Because, and again, I'm going back some number of years in this podcast, but there was a time when all I was hearing from people was, we're multi-generational now. We've got so many people. These kids don't understand us, and these boomers don't understand us. I believe it's being worked out largely because of the kind of work that you're doing, but it was a big deal there for a while.
Yeah,
It's still a
I
big
think
deal.
it's still a big deal. So it's so often we'll hear, people will call and they'll say, can you come fix our Gen Zs? Right? Like that's the call we'll get from an executive. And, so part of that, but this generational conflict has been going on for every generation. I remember when I was a young Gen Xer and I was hearing people complain about the Gen Xers that they didn't, get us. Right. So I think the thing is that we are more similar than different. And if we can connect at a human level and focus on those four dimensions to really, really get to know one another as human beings, to understand what things look like from each other's perspective, to show up really curious about motivations and what successful outcome would do for you, and then to actively listen to that. To get clarity around expectations. Part of the problem with conflict with multi-generation is that people are having different expectations, but they're not necessarily articulating those expectations. And then moving to commitment, and do we actually have a shared agreement on how we're going to move forward? And so that, from no matter what generation you're in, if you focus on those dimensions and really work on collaboration, it will happen quicker than you think.
I'm going to go over the four dimensions very quickly. 1, connection. 2, clarity. 3, curiosity. 4, commitment. You can't
Yes.
have one without the other.
Yes.
Got it. But I wanted to ask you, both of you, looking ahead, what trends do you foresee in the workplace leadership and conflict resolution over the next few years? Right now, we are in a very volatile place. We have way too much access to the internet. We have keyboards. A lot of us don't have any filters.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you see happening?
I think that one of the big, obviously, AI is a huge technical transformation that's
Yep.
happening, and it's interesting that when you think about AI and more things being automated, of course, that is going to create all kinds of conflict. It's going to create conflict with people abusing it, misusing it, with jobs being eliminated. There's so much opportunity for things to go sideways with it, and there's all the amazing benefits that AI can contribute to organizations. So we're going to need to embrace that this is here, and how are we going to really collaborate in using this new tool. But I think that part of that is, and we write about this in our book, Courageous Cultures, that in an AI universe, it is more important than ever for humans to do the things that only humans can do, which is to connect and create. And AI is not going to show up genuinely curious about you as a human being, even if it pretends to, right? And so as the technology gets more sophisticated, how do we get more sophisticated in our humanity and how we're showing up with one another?
That is
Karen,
very
that's
well said.
creativity. We are in charge of our creativity, I believe. If you're
Yes.
walking around saying, oh, whoa, it's me, your creativity just went out the door and it may not be coming back. You need to calm down, sit with yourself, and invite it back in, because that's what makes us human, is our
Yeah,
creativity.
absolutely.
Yeah, I also
After
think that,
you.
yeah, I think that there's another thing that we all have to be aware of. And there's the AI aspect, but there's also the technological aspect of as well. And so much of our polarization and so much of our inability to talk, when you were mentioning generational differences, like generationally younger people these days have a much harder time picking up the phone. They don't know how to have that conversation. They don't have and this is a generalization. Obviously, some people are great on the phone, but it's not a skill that's been developed as well. So there's some discomfort and avoidance around it. And you look at all of those kinds of things, and how social media and the resonance chambers, the echo chamber effect, and all that kind of thing. Those are things we need to be aware of, because if we're not intentional about addressing them for ourselves and drawing one another in, those things can continue to escalate. And so they are contributing factors to the increase in workplace conflict. So it is something we have to keep an eye on. And I think each of us can be intentional about, I'm going to be part of the solution for that. That's the other flavor or nuance I would add.
Yeah, this morning I was walking with my dog in the dark because look, I'm in the deep south. We have 2 seasons, hot and hotter than hell. You don't want to be walking out there when the sun is up. You just don't. And I have long been concerned about how younger people communicate, because I don't think they do very well. And it's an observation. I'm not being critical. It's an observation. But, I'm walking around this morning and I came across, coming from different directions. It's a very small neighborhood, 3 different kids heading for what I guess is a bus stop, or where the bus stop. I said, hey, good morning to each one of them. Only one of them bothered to look up from his phone and say, oh, hey, hi, there's another human here. The other 2 just kept on going. That is not unusual.
And you're seeing that play out with, hey, you see it on TikTok, right? My boss fired me over Slack, right? That kind of stuff. And that's our mission is to help people get the right communication skills that will help them to be successful, to connect at a human level, to set clear expectations, to show up curious in their conversations.
I see this a lot. Not so long ago, a bus pulled out in front of me, school bus in front of my house. And I've told this story before because it really kind of broke my heart. But these 3 kids, so it's 3, I don't know why, but teenagers, young teenagers, they get off the bus, they're glued, they're going to have remember when you'd find somebody's grandmother had what they called a dowager's hump, a humpback. They're all going to wind up with that because they don't straighten their necks. I'm telling you, they just don't. But they're glued to their phones. How they didn't trip off those steps, I'll never know. They get off the bus. They walk down the street 3 abreast because we don't have sidewalks. It's a very small neighborhood. Never spoke to one another. Never made eye contact. Didn't know I was standing right there at the mailbox. They didn't even see me. And they came off the bus right in my general vicinity. I was invisible to them. And all I could do is think, somebody's going to hurt you guys. Somebody's going to grab you or hurt you. You're going to trip. You're going to fall. Pay attention to your surroundings. Talk to one another. They didn't. I stood there and I watched them walk to the end of the street. They never, ever made eye contact with one another. I wanted to cry a bit for them. I really did.
And it's unfortunately the case that that's not limited to kids. One of the most important things we can do in any conversation we're having with another human being, and I don't care if we're 56 years old, put down your phone. If you're with somebody, be with them. And it's easy to say that, like, oh, I'm a grumpy old man, but no, like if you're a manager talking to your employee, yes, there are a lot of things happening and you're going to be getting those messages and so forth. And if you have to be interruptible, frame the conversation that way. Hey, listen, I am here for you. I want to have this conversation. And I also know that I may be interrupted by these things. And so just giving people the respect of our presence that way is another kind of the space that we're holding for any kind of conversation that we're having. Right. Makes it easier. It's not limited to kids. It's something all of us need to focus on.
We're just opening up the holidays here. Thanksgiving is on the horizon. And I'm always the cook, and I always have people here. I do the traditional Thanksgiving meal. And my rule is and always has been, you leave your phone in the car. Don't even bring it in my house. And they're like, what? I'm telling you, don't do it. And they don't, because I won't feed them.
Well, and apparently you have
my
good food.
Rules,
so
I do. I really do.
That's a good signal of just how good your cooking is, Denise.
Decorate second rule is bring your own Tupperware. You can take some home with you, but you're not taking my dishes with you. So, well, listen, we are running out of time, and I want to thank you both, for sharing your truly inspiring insights with us today. But before we close, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience, and where can people connect with both of you?
Yeah, we would just encourage you if you're listening and you're thinking about a conversation, you're like, I know, but it might be hard. We would just encourage you to have the conversation. Ask yourself, why does what you have to say matter? What's at stake if you stay silent? And imagine you've had the conversation, whether or not they did exactly what you wanted, but you have been heard. How do you feel? And you can find us. Our company is Let's Grow Leaders, and if you just go to that website, you can get to all the books and blogs and to David's podcast and by asking for a friend. And the book is Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict: What to Say Next to De-Stress the Workday, Build Collaboration, and Calm Difficult Customers.
Last thoughts from you?
Well, Karin said it. It's about having the conversation. I like to cap up the conversation with, I was having a coaching call with somebody who was stressed out with some colleagues at work and their manager. And then we talked it through the next day and talked some powerful phrases. And the next day he texts me and says, David, I'm going to get a tattoo. I said, oh, really? What's the tattoo going to say? He texts back. It's going to say, just have the conversation. It can't go well if you don't have it. And when you do have it, it's going to go better than you thought. So just have the conversation.
Well, tell him to make sure that he can read it when he moves his arm. It's not upside down. Anyway, we'll listen to our audience. In this episode, I had the great pleasure of speaking with Karin Hurt and David Dye, renowned leadership experts and authors of Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. And I'm going to say it again, this book is not just for business professionals. Individuals can also greatly benefit from its insights. I have, that's for sure. The book provides practical communication strategies that are applicable in various personal and social contexts, and it helps readers navigate conflicts effectively, whether you're at work or if you're in everyday life. And I'll be honest with you, I have never understood this whole work-life balance. It's all the same for me. I don't see how you can separate either one, but that's another soapbox. So anyway, the authors, Karin Hurt and David Dye, emphasize that conflict is a universal experience, and the tools that they offer can help anyone, and I do mean anyone, improve their interactions with others. So by learning to use the powerful phrases outlined in the book and other places that David has shared with, individuals can enhance their ability to communicate, foster understanding, and build stronger relationships in any setting. Look, it's my opinion, and I have a lot of them. This book is a valuable resource for anyone looking to develop their conflict resolution skills, making it a worthwhile addition to both professional and personal libraries. So if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did and found it helpful, I invite you to go look for both of them, look at their website, listen to their blogs, find them on LinkedIn, and then head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Why? Because your feedback not only supports this show, but it also helps others discover these valuable conversations. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Karin, David, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. A great conversation.
Thank you, Denise.
You.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.